more you want that woman or that money or that status or whatever you're chasing, you're pushing it away. You're pushing that pendulum further and further away from you. We're literally just playing out like these patterns, and to the degree that we're not aware of it, it's just happening like on default, like a computer program. And so it's like, oh, we had these successful actions. Like, of course we're going to do that in the future because we've deemed that that gets us some sort of a perception of pleasure. What is worth moving towards, that is worth sacrificing all these different aspects of yourself that you hold on to so tightly, but you're willing to let it go from love and offer it up because you know that if you do, make something even greater happen. Our thinking center, our emotional center, and our will center are the seats of the soul, the 3 seats of the soul. Now, if we only listen to the head center, you're going to get mixed results. If you only listen to the feeling center, same thing, same with the will. So it's a matter of where do they all line up? Where are they all saying the same thing? And that is your internal truth. That is your internal compass, but it's in 3 different centers. You need to be aware of each of them and what they're saying.
Eric, thank you, bro, for being on and taking some time. You're on your mission and you're in Virginia, traveling the world. And again, you're still one of the most deep guys that I know that likes to go deep. That do you find surface level stuff interesting or entertaining at all? That'd be,
I'm learning to enjoy it more, I would say. And
good.
I'm learning to enjoy it more.
In my own journey, I've always been more of the serious one sometimes, and life is not serious. It threw me around a lot to the point where I had to laugh at how comical shit was. And sometimes the more I became serious, the more God would just be like, I'm going to put little obstacles, little pies in your face to get slapped until you realize to learn to laugh. And then I'm like, all right. And I just gave up. And I'm like, honestly, fuck it. Like, I don't even know half the time what's right or wrong or what's up or down, but like, I'm gonna flow with it a little bit. I'm going to do what I believe is right and try to learn and laugh at my failures and learn and laugh at the darkness and learn and laugh at the light. But I kind of want to start with that on that topic. You mentioned that you're starting a group of people that want to hit on deeper things, deeper connection, more on spirituality, right? And you said something very interesting in that in your call to that, because I watched the video that you called people to, and you said, if you want to go beyond status, you want to go beyond, money. And a part of me was like, especially living in Los Angeles, you almost forget, like, oh shit, there's something beyond, getting all this money and just getting all this status, right? And then you kind of see it in everybody's mind of like, this is the pinnacle of what life's about. You get the money, you get the women, you get the power, whatever, right? And, you have your, what's his name? Andrew Tates of the world. They're taking the world by storm. They really preach, it's about getting the money, getting the power, etc. Which I love. I love Andrew Tate. He has a lot of great points, and I'm smart enough to take the good and separate the bad. But I wanted to delve a little bit into this because I do believe that people need to be able to step out of the herd, step out of the norm, and step out of the matrix, so to speak. And the norm, the matrix, the herd is still on this level of, get the status, get the money, and then you'll be happy, and then you'll be content and succeed and put a stamp on life that way. Now, is there a way to bypass that?
Have you read The Philosophy of Freedom by Rudolf Steiner?
No.
So in this book, he basically, it's not the type of book you read for the content. It's a book that structures the way you think, and it's quite difficult to actually comprehend and to read it. It's not meant to be, it's an exercise for the mind.
Yeah.
And through reading it, one of my biggest takeaways is that almost everything we do as humans is a program, and we're simply carrying out a pattern that is very predictable, and it's based on a lot of different factors, but it's not really ours. We're not really generating it. It's not generated from the self, it's generated from the outside world. And so we're responding to the outside world. We're moving towards perceived pleasure and away from perceived pain. And so to step out of this, you know, we need to observe what is really my motive. And then where is that motive arising from? Is this motive because this is what has been shown to be important? Is it's a value that I believe to be important? And then if you do, then why? Why is it important? Why is it your value? And that's, you know, where the real work begins, because that's a personal exploration, right? And I'm sure, you know, we've both studied with Paul Chek, and he's very big on the core values. So I'm sure you've danced quite a bit for your own values.
Yes, absolutely.
The only way to really know values is to go through the experience of having them, and then also the contrast of not having them. And through that, you begin to see what is really important to you. And what is persisting, what is consistent, is generally more true for you. And what tends to fall away is generally not sustainable. And that's why it's falling away.
That's a good point. Jordan Peterson, I love Jordan Peterson. Do you watch Jordan Peterson?
Not as much anymore, but I used to it. But I definitely enjoy the way it speaks and articulates himself.
Absolutely. I think he's gotten smarter since I first started.
I believe it.
He's actually, when I hear him speak now, he's gotten smarter. I don't even know if that was possible. That guy's fucking extremely smart. But he mentioned that when you live a life by truth, that is the most exciting.
Yes.
Right? And I do think that truth is not the norm today, unfortunately. Maybe it's never been the norm. But the people that get the arrows on their back are usually the people that are like, hey, this is wrong. This is not right. We shouldn't be doing this. Like, fuck what the norm is. Like, I'm going to stand for what is true, and not, even if you don't like it, right? But I like to argue that is extremely difficult for a normal person to do. I mean, I wish it wasn't, but I do want to say that it potentially might be. And then, again, in my mind, I do see people feeling like, okay, first I'm going to get that root chakra, get all my bases covered with money, get my bases covered with my status, and then I'll do what I truly want to do, right? You can tell when people are finally making money, they dress ridiculous or they act ridiculous, and then, they're of resource to other people. They don't need anybody else, so they could finally step out. But lately, we've been even seeing the fact that, no, you can't, because then we'll cancel you, right?
Well, I've been fortunate to be around many affluent people at different levels of their financial development and personal development. And what I saw with that is, the trials never end. And so you get the money, and then what? There's like a divorce or a car accident,
Right.
Or whatever. There's like always, or something with the money. Like a lot of these guys have made a lot of money now with the nature of kind of the digital space now. Even they're like having to try all this different stuff, and stuff they were doing back in the day that made them a bunch of money isn't working as well anymore.
Yeah,
So there's always something keeping us engaged in the experience. And so really there's nothing, like, it's never we get something and then it's all good. It's like, it's all, there's a quote from the Buddha, I believe, and it has to do with basically, basically the quote says that his teachings are like a raft and they only get you to the shore. And the sad part is many people mistake the raft for the shore. But you can look at this in a bigger picture of life. These things, the finances, the relationships, like all this stuff, all your life experience, every moment is only the raft. It's only bringing you to the shore, but it is not the shore in itself. So the destination is like an ever-changing process as we're evolving. And so, that's why they say, like, enjoy what you're doing. And, this comes back to Rudolf Steiner, where it's like, all this stuff's a program, and like, we still need to engage in the material world and, maintain our health and our, if you have a family, providing for your family, he teaches us, the most important, obviously. And so these things, it's all like a game, right? But it's about moving from a place of love, moving from a motivation that comes from within. And this can be a simple mindset shift, right? Like let's say you're doing business, right? And you're like, oh, like, the system and like, whatever, you don't like the way things are. You're like, this is evil, money's evil, whatever. Uh, you know, you can even step out of that and reframe it and be like, oh, I get the opportunity to like play this character as this like
Yeah.
entrepreneur guy and like serve people in some way, deliver some value to them, and move from a place of love. And in doing so, you're investing in something that is inherently fulfilling. And I had a teacher, a shaman back in the day when I was like early 20s, and he was all about investing in short-term investments and long-term investments. And so your short-term investments would be like stuff that you want to appreciate in the short-term range. So this could be like jujitsu, maybe you like to walk in the park or walk on the beach. You like to enjoy connections and good meals and, whatever else, these like short-term investments that by doing the action is inherently fulfilling. And then long-term investments is, he used the example of a book. He was writing a book. And so that was like his bigger picture thing. And so anything he was doing, whether it was researching or writing or editing, any of these other sub aspects of creating that book was an investment in that bigger picture. So we can break down our dreams and invest in the bigger picture in a way that we're moving from love, and that the taking the action is inherently fulfilling. Therefore, if there's no result, it doesn't matter because it was already nourishing to do it.
And is that the shore that you mentioned with the Buddha quote? Is that the shore, moving with love and being present with the journey itself?
Well, I mean, there's a paradox to it because that too is only a step. And so each of these lessons is only a step, and you move up the step and then there's another step. And so I met this Babaji lineage breathwork guy in Mount Shasta, super deep guy, went through a lot. And what he told me is like, the more you learn and like you delve into this stuff, the more you realize you don't know anything and you never will. And so
I feel like that all the time.
there's a teaching that like, there's practices we have, whether it's Tai Chi or a meditation practice or these different things, or yoga, and these things, they get us to a place, relatively, and then sometimes like they're no longer valuable for us and we need to evolve our practice or do something new because, coming back to the Buddha, and I don't subscribe to any like religious, I'm very much a spiritual scientist in a sense, and I just study everything and try it and say what works.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome.
But
which is why you're on the podcast, man.
He says with the practices, right, that's also like a raft. And when you take the raft, let's say like it's yoga, right? You take the raft and you get to the shore that the yoga could bring you to.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Then arrive at the shore and put the raft on your back and carry it. All right?
Yeah.
So once that practice gets us to a certain level of development and it's like served its purpose for us, then it's appropriate at times to relinquish it and take on something new that will allow us to make that next step, whatever that is. And that's the challenge, right? Because it's such an individualized process and it's different for everybody.
Yeah. So I'm starting to understand your quote a little bit more. So a raft are these practices that we take on into our lives, like journaling or ice baths, and they'll take us to a certain level. And then at one point, this is as far as the ice bath can take you into your spirituality. You got to move up to the next thing type deal. Is that what you're...
That's like, it can be as deep as that into like, Steiner's teachings or any of these great teachers. Any of their teachings are only helping you make that step. And some of them are more comprehensive than others. But at the same time, every moment there's something to learn. And, not going back to like this mundane aspect we're talking about of enjoying like more surface level conversations. Like for me now, I'm like, stepping back and just listening more closely, listening more deeply to the entire environment around me, and also what that person is really conveying through their presence, what they're really trying to say, and noticing, okay, what is the need that this person, like in many cases, someone has a need, and I'm feeling into like, what is the need that's wanting to be fulfilled? In the past, I would have had resistance to that because there's like something innate about, someone wants money, you don't want to give it to them. Someone wants love, you don't want to, like, it's like, when there's this strong desire, it's like almost like an inherent pushback. But I'm like tuning in myself more, and it's a practice, it's not easy, but feeling that resistance to give that person what they're trying to get and just giving it to them. Because I was like, one day I was like kind of reflecting. I was like, well, okay, I'm listening to this person. I hear the need that they want. Maybe they want appreciation or gratification or whatever. And I'm like, well, why not just give it to them? Like, and it was like an epiphany for me. I was like, just give it to them. Why not? They want it.
Sometimes you got to give them the bad things they want too.
Yeah, no, it's all cancel, but it's pick your battles.
Yeah, yeah. Elliot Hulse is one of my awakening guides, if you will. Just a guy who just like was fit and jacked, and at the same time very deep and philosophical. And I admired him because I felt like that was the entire package. And he had a video once about this kid asked him like, my grandpa just wants to drink and party, and he's old and he's unhealthy, and then like he wants this for Christmas. He's like, bro, just give him a fucking beer. Like, why are you trying to, first of all, change him, and second of all, resist that? That's just not where he's at.
Well, in that case, like it's very situational. Like in the Sufism, they teach, to hold your whatever anger or feeling or desire and hold it in your hand and observe it before acting upon it. So, like in the event, let's say, using this beer example, like your grandpa wants a beer, you can take that. Maybe your instant inclination is to be like, no, like grandpa, that's bad for you. Like you shouldn't be doing this, killing you, whatever. And you just pause and you hold that, and you're like, okay. Is this stone meant to be cast? And then you step out of it and you pull yourself out of the emotional reactivity and you just reflect for a moment. And then from that place, sometimes it's appropriate to cast a stone, and other times it's appropriate just to drop it on the ground and forget about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that you say that because I grew up very empathic. I think it had to do with my grandma raising me and her being so old in my eyes, and she was always or my mom told me, it's like, hey, she's old. You gotta be like careful with her. So I think growing up, that really molded me to be very like, like, oh, look, are you okay? Is everything good? Like, let me like support you. I don't want to be a trouble to you at all. Like very emotionally intelligent in that way to, not make my grandma suffer even more than she was being her age. And so I never cast stones. I was always like easy to let it go, up to the point where it just didn't serve me anymore. And it's actually kind of fun now to be like, you know what? This stone needs to be fucking thrown, and then throwing it. And then like now I feel like actual balance of like, I assessed, I knew what was okay, what was right, and and it was okay to do what I used to think was inappropriate or the wrong thing. So I think there's a duality of that, right? Some people may be over-exerting, throwing stones every fucking time or chance they get. And then I think I was on the other side where it was like, no, like I don't want to cause a ruckus. People are struggling on their own. I don't know if you grew up in a different way.
That definitely, because like, and I believe, at least in my own life and for many people I've worked with, it's like that's like a survival mechanism. And we're constantly tuning into our environment and being very sensitive, and we don't want to like mess something up or whatever. And at least for me, it came from a place of like not wanting to, maybe, I don't know, I think it comes down to like being worthy of receiving love, and you want to be perceived well in that person's eyes. And
Right.
and also it's familial. So even around Thanksgiving, I was observing different family and just listening to some of my family, and they would say like, oh, like growing up, I didn't want conflict and stuff. And I'm just listening to this. I'm like, like, okay, you didn't want conflict. And then interesting, I have this pattern of not wanting to deal with conflict. And so it's, and then we can observe that and be like, like, is that still valuable for me? I think it comes down to that awareness, right? And the thing with the stones is, it really matters the place you're doing it from and the timing. So that's where like the reflection comes in, because if the immediate reaction is like, oh, this person said this and I can now cast this stone at them, it's like, well, okay, pause, like slow down.
Just waiting.
Yeah, just like hold it for a moment. You can cast it, hold it for a moment, and then Steiner, he also teaches like a series of questions to ask yourself, especially especially on if you're not sure, like if it feels like it could be something you're saying potentially out of place, or he says, reflect, is it true, first of all? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it the right timing slash setting place? So maybe it's true, kind, and necessary for this person to hear it, but is it necessary for them to hear it around all of their friends and this like really deep thing that might be hard for them to hear? It's like maybe wait, pull them off to the side, and then so there's a degree of I guess assessment and reflection, and not to say that this I think should take away from the spontaneity of life. And I think as we practice these things, it can become more it can be done pretty quickly to a degree that's not like we're like stopping and needing to reflect for like 10 minutes after someone says something. But we can kind of gauge the situation relatively quickly and trust ourselves and be willing to make mistakes with it also, because that's how we learn.
Dude, I love that. Is there something that list is called, or, is there, because I like to compartmentalize things.
Yeah.
Just because in my own experience, I've had to create those for myself as well. I have, I'm an eager person to like share something, especially when like, I study and I learn things, and then I'm like, oh, like, fuck yeah, like I have something great to say or something funny to say too. And I'm just like waiting, the conversation's flowing, right? And I'm just like, I want to say it, but it's not my time to speak yet. And I'm holding on to the rock. Let's just keep the metaphor going. And I'm waiting, but the time has passed. And then I had to learn to teach myself to ask, like, all right, is this still relevant to what we're talking about? Or am I going to have to let this one go? And it's like, oh, we're on a different topic. We moved on. It's like, fuck. So I've had to teach myself that, because sometimes we move on and then I'm like, wait, here it comes. Like, let me throw this in there. And then it just didn't flow with the conversation. And I made it about myself.
Right.
But I would like to create a name for like a thought process. I mean, of questions to ask yourself in just in general conversation or decision making.
Well, and it was coming back to Elliot Hulse. I actually remember him saying, not every good idea is meant to be acted upon. And so I do a lot of my social media very like intuitive, and I kind of I like to make it easy, say whatever I feel inspired to say. But I remember I was like, had this like really deep dream one day. It was actually this week, and I was gonna share something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like quite confronting, honestly. That would have triggered quite a bit of people. Maybe it was like tough love they needed to hear, but I kind of deemed that like, maybe these aren't the feathers to ruffle today. And so I decided to, abstain from that message. And I think so sometimes we have these inspirations, and that it comes back to that reactivity, right? We can kind of step back and be like, maybe not.
Yeah. Let me, it's great that we're bringing this up. I'm going to just jump to this part of the questions that I have for you. It's a quote from the Tao Te Ching. It says, 30 spokes share the wheel's hub. It is the center hole that makes it useful. Shape clay into a bowl. It is the space within that makes it useful. Cut doors and windows from a room or for a room. It is the space which makes it useful. Therefore, benefit comes from what is there, usefulness from what is not there. And, in my life, and I skip to this question because in my life, the ability to create space within emotionally in my responses and just kind of like how we're talking has been the most useful thing. Being able to like get shit on by, people or whoever, situations. Typically it's more situations. And just being able to accept what I feel I shouldn't have to be accepting. Like, this shouldn't happen to me. Like, that person doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. And then having to just create that space before I respond, before I make a decision, holding that stone before I cast or make an irrational decision. Could you speak onto how, sometimes I forget how I even started that journey, how how could people start that? I feel if everybody had that in their tool belt of life or capabilities, the world would probably 10x the potential.
So for me, I started out when I was like 18 with yoga, and it helped me in the sense, I think the most valuable thing I got from yoga is that I would just breathe very consciously for an hour and I would just be good. Um, and from there, I discovered Tai Chi not that much longer away from that. And then I started just doing pretty much only Tai Chi. And that's what helped me. I was a very athletic person. I also was very much in my head. And for me, like a sitting meditation seemed like the craziest thing in the world, even to sit still. Even now, I struggle sometimes. There's like running around like a chicken with my head cut off, like, oh, what can I do? I gotta do more, like whatever, and finding the balance in that. But yeah, for me, it was Tai Chi because it was something I could move and kind of relax and just, it helped my mind to let go because I was actively doing something versus just sitting there. Um, but then again, that's like, there's so many different roads. So for someone like that, who's maybe more athletic, they're very much in their head, they have a hard time being still, that's probably a very useful tool to use. Though I will say now I do a lot less Tai Chi. I still find it very valuable and I use it kind of like when I feel like I need it. Though it's kind of like one of those things, it's like a step that gets you to the place. Now all I do for that kind of thing is like 5 minutes every day in the morning. I just observe the space between my thoughts. And so a thought will rise and I allow it to just do its thing and then it goes and there's a space between that thought and the next thought. And you keep observing that space and it starts to expand, expand, expand. And the more you practice it, the easier this gets. And then you can begin to take this into your daily life while you're driving, while you're out and about, and observing your thoughts more consciously as they're happening and allowing them to flow. Because for me, I suppressed a lot of my emotions and my thoughts for many, many years. And so allowing these thoughts to run their cycle was a lot of the work for me to do. And so I found a lot of value in this exercise because you're observing thought, but you're also creating this spaciousness. And this is a form of passive meditation. And I think it's important to also note that there's many people that consider themselves to be empaths and like very energetically sensitive and this kind of thing. And there's many variables that can lead to this. But to keep it as simple as possible, it's like we can be too passive. And I was definitely way into that realm. And the problem with that is if you become too developed, even in this form of meditation, without the balancing force, then you become too sensitive to other people's emotions or thoughts. Like all the thing with the thoughts thing, if you quiet the space between the thoughts, you'll start to notice other people's thoughts because you don't have any thoughts there. And so you can become too sensitive and then things can get muddled, which is not a very healthy place to be. And that's where it's important to bring in a form of active meditation. In one form I learned, this is from a man, Robert Gilbert. He has a course, The Essential Teachings and Spiritual Practices, on Vesica Institute. I would highly recommend it. And like the exercise he has you do is observe kind of like the space where your pineal gland is, and you just visualize a little golden dot, and then you expand it to the degree that encompasses your head, and then you keep expanding it for like 5 minutes. And this is what he called like the illumination of your thinking center. And there's many techniques like this you can do. Steiner had a lot of techniques about connecting a plant and visualizing the seed opening up and then the plant sprouting and then going through its full cycle into full bloom and then death or residing back into the earth. And so there's many different visualizations. And the thing about this is, you can take the scientific perspective and look at that we have mirror neurons, and that's why people enjoy watching sports and this kind of thing, because you feel like you're there. You're watching a scary movie, like you get adrenaline rush, so that the brain can't really differentiate. So if you observe this plant going through its process, you're actually experiencing the expression of that, and your brain doesn't really know the difference that that's not happening to you. And there's deeper, I guess, esoteric aspects of that, but I mean, on a brain level, that's kind of what's going on. And so these different visualizations are very powerful for cultivating qualities within us. And what this does is it creates more of a masculine creative force within you, which balances this very yin passive form of meditation. And through this, you become much more stronger in your presence, much stronger in your spirit and your embodiment, that you don't get thrown off by everything going on around you anymore.
What is the masculine part of this? Is it the visualization part?
What is the what?
The masculine part?
Yeah, that's the active form is creation, right? It's like the force of life coming through.
So the visualization of creation is the masculine part of this?
Yes, and this requires effort. That's the thing is
That's the
like
masculine part.
so people talk a lot about will. It's a very trendy topic now. I was studying this like Sufi guy, and he was basically saying will is just power, and you could equate it to like the power of God. Like this, the only power that exists is will. Like we were created out of divine will, and so the only thing, so even our body, even to stand upright, requires will. It's not strength or exercise or whatever that makes you stronger. It's will. You couldn't even move your hand without will. There needs to be will moving through. And so they speak a lot about cultivating this will in forms of concentration. And it's very important right now in the world with all these different distractions and things pulling us all over the place. And like these reactive tendencies are very easy to fall into. And it's very valuable to be creating faculties of concentration. And whether we're aware of it or not, we're always cultivating qualities. And, I've been observing this within my own life. It's like sometimes there's like cycles that come through and things that are hard for us to let go of. And at least observing my own life, that's because there were still lessons to be learned. So maybe on some level you learned some aspects of it, but you needed to see the deeper aspect of like, at least for me, like in different situations, like I'll use one example of, it's very easy to use like caffeine and like organic tobacco and different, you know, just carbohydrate snacks, right? When you're busy, you're just needing like a boost of energy. It's very easy to do that.
Yeah.
And observing that was actually coming from, for me at least, like a reactive place and not really observing the quality I was cultivating. And so in that case, like for me to step out of that, I had to see that like, what quality am I cultivating? And I was cultivating quality of like reactivity and also desire. Okay, I fulfill desire, I fulfill desire. And so that's a very weak, very weak place to be, but that was a quality that I was cultivating. And that's not a good or a bad thing. The question is that the quality you want to be cultivating?
Yeah.
That was like kind of the deeper lesson to it. And so all of life is qualities. And so people say, oh, I'm not good at this, or I don't have the willpower, all these different things. It's all habits. It's all willpower. You create it by doing it. You create it by investing in that quality. If you want the quality of concentration, invest in the quality of concentration, the quality of compassion, of understanding, of joy, invest in these states, invest in this quality, and it will become your baseline. Yeah. It's really that simple. But it's not easy, right? It's like there's practice and it takes effort and will.
Absolutely. That's so good because do you lift weights still?
Yes.
Okay. So
now it's more like
around there.
Yeah, I have a mace I use. I like to stand on the Swiss ball and do different things. It's like whatever. I do a lot of crawling stuff now too. Just like functional, whatever. It's like a form of play. I like to just move my body. It feels good,
Yeah, yeah. So when I lift weights, I always rack the barbell. I always rack the barbell to the more difficult side first. Like, let's say I have a deadlift bar this way, horizontally. I go to the far end of it first, and then I'll do the easy side, the one that's closer to the weight stack. And in my head, it's always like, I do hard things first, and then I do easy things. I do hard things first, and then I do easy things. I do hard things first, and then I do easy things. And then I'm just always feeding that loop for myself personally, because I want to feed that in my own life. Like, I get important things done first that are harder, whatnot, and then I go have fun. I do the harder things first that are important, and then I go have fun. So I just, even with the smallest decisions, sometimes you're feeding what you just said, I forgot exactly. I was about, you just call it where's the word?
Qualities.
The qualities that you want.
Consciousness.
Exactly. So, and then as soon as you said that, and that clicked in my head, and then it reminded me of all the all the ones I need to improve on.
Well, and then
So,
you kind of reaffirm that, right? That becomes a value for you because you see like how investing in that is in some way beneficial. And
right,
is like there's the practice very similar to that where you observe something every single day. It's an exercise. You observe something you've been putting off, whether it's your taxes or whatever it is, something you've been putting off, and you just do it. And if it
yes,
like taxes, maybe it takes you a couple days, whatever, break it up into smaller pieces, but just do the thing that you don't want to do and just do it. And the cool thing that happens with this is a habit. And so if you start doing this, you say, okay, I don't want to do this. I'm just going to do it. And at the beginning, this will be very difficult,
oh
uh,
yes,
but it's also a choice. So you make that choice and you do it. Now, as you practice this, that becomes your new kind of way of relating to your experience or your life. And so, at least when I was practicing this, something would come up and be like, okay, I don't want to do this thing. But because I was practicing it, I'd be like, well, I could just do it right now. Okay, let's just do it. And so you develop that habit and it just becomes like who you are, it becomes integrated into you. But we oscillate in and out of these habits. It's like, and this is where the values thing is so malleable because like the practices, maybe it serves you to a certain degree, and then maybe at one phase of your life it's no longer necessary, or maybe there's a more optimal thing you could be doing. And so we're always adapting these habits and these qualities. And I've been experimenting a lot, man. Like when I was traveling in like Europe and India and Japan, like there wasn't always like organic food and like good options to eat. And you kind of just make do. And I would like, observe my own neurosis about whatever and just kind of, I'd be okay, I'll just eat this with love and like, pretend that it's all good. Right. And to a degree, I experiment. I gave this a wholehearted, like, okay, let's just see what happens. And what I noticed is, yes, you can transmute anything with love. Yet there was still a relative stress load on my body and certain things that I would eat, like your body still has to get rid of toxins. It still responds to the material realm. So the mind over matter like goes to a certain degree and you can still feel relatively good. That being said, like your body still has to process whatever toxins or whatever stuff and get it out of your body. So I would have different forms of detox or whatever, like, and that's the body pushing out the whatever it can't use.
Mhm.
So,
Interesting. Have you found to have different beings inside you? Like, meaning, like, sometimes I have a part of myself that throws tantrums. Like, I don't want to do that. And I can feel that thought in my head, like, oh, like a baby, literally like a baby. And I have to kind of calm it down a little bit. And it's all right. I love you. It's cool. Like, I get it. You don't want to do it, but we know what we do want. We want to get the result later, right? It's like, yeah, it's like, how about we do this? How about we do a little bit? We'll just get the ball rolling. Just get the ball. We'll do the first thing of that. Just get the little ball rolling. If we like it, we'll continue. If not, we'll continue it later, and then I'll give you a reward at the end. And I find myself kind of like having these, I want to say conversations, but like this almost like dealing with different aspects of myself. And I don't know if it's just me or if you have that as well and it's a human thing.
well, I was taught by this woman a technique of speaking to your inner child in this way, and actually, in a large way, your inner child is your subconscious, or very much interwoven into your subconscious, and developing that relationship with it and speaking to it as something like a being, right? I think that's one way of looking at it. I subscribe to the philosophy of like the 12 round the one sacred geometry. And so it's like if you're looking at a tree from one angle, you can't really say that tree. And maybe you just take a step and a step and a step. And if you step all the way around, you have a more uh, comprehensive understanding of what's in the middle. And so, we can take any idea and look at it from many different perspectives. Then we have a more holistic understanding of it. I would say the way that resonates the most with me, at least now, is I look at things more of like a quality. Because I think, as humans, we tend to personify things. to make it more like us, especially, you know, like if you start speaking about working with different spiritual beings and this kind of thing. For me, you know, that's more of working with different energetic qualities than like, I mean, it is like, I guess, in a way, a living thing, but I don't see it as like in the way you would see a person, or it's more of like, for example, the angels, especially the archangels, are very much more of just a quality of consciousness, and each of them carries a very specific quality, and they don't deviate from it. They just uphold that quality. Um, yeah, I think, you know, and I do speak to myself in that way sometimes with like, especially in relation to like emotions and my different organs and stuff. I kind of tune in, I check into different parts of my being, and I just like, if they feel like they need to be held or witnessed, I kind of hold space for them in that way, and you know, give them presence and
Yeah.
awareness and love. So yeah, I guess, you know, I can relate on that level.
Okay. Seems like you don't.
Well, I mean, I do like, I guess, speak to myself in that way, you know, like I'll be like, different aspects, something might be coming up, and I'll just be like, yeah, like, you know, I hear you, and like, you know, these aspects can have a voice or a story of their own, and just kind of giving them, you know, I hear you, and it's like, oh wow, I mean, that, yeah, that is really hard. Like, I
Yeah.
get it, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we still got to do it. That's kind of how
Yeah.
it goes with me. I did fuck up once. And anybody listening, or yourself too, I did mess up once because, you know, sometimes I'm just too fucking aggressive in my approach. And I remember I needed to get something done that I've been putting off. And I said, you know what? Fuck this. Because it was a difficult task and I'd never done it before. But I needed to get it done. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm not doing anything fun, any pleasure until this is fucking done. Worst mistake of my life. I didn't get it done. Took probably 4 times longer than it should have. And then I went on like this spree of like not working out, and like I threw, it was like a like temper tantrum of like, no, this is unfair. I quit. I'm resigning. You know what? Fuck all your healthy stuff. I'm not doing none of that anymore. Like, it was like the oddest thing. And I don't know if you can relate or bring some light to that, or if anybody else can for that matter. I don't know exactly what happens to me during that time.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, many aspects of our subconscious, they do have a life to their own, and they do have, you know, desires or needs, and to the degree that we don't acknowledge those, then they might just rampage on us and be like, well, like, screw you, if you don't want to cooperate, then like, we're not going to do anything.
Yeah, man.
And so it's not, you have to like do the thing that they want, but they just need to be heard. So you can be like, if desire, you're like, you know, I hear you, you really want this thing, like, I get it, but let's do this thing, like, I'll give you the thing later, and like whatever, and then you can negotiate with yourself in this way.
Bro, it's like the funniest thing of being a human.
Yeah. No.
It's funny to the fact that, you know, we all know what to do. And it's the getting yourself to do it is like 99% of the challenge. What the flying fuck sometimes, you know?
Well, and for me, like, I tend to be very much in the extremes. And so it's very easy for me to do like, okay, like, I just won't eat anything that's like not deemed like healthy or whatever. It's like I'm doing all my stuff and whatever. And then it's just like extreme form of like self-denial and like asceticism, but it's not from like a healthy place. It's from this like really rigid thing, and it, you know, leads to all these problems. Then on the flip side, if I do like indulge in things, I tend to like do a lot of it because it feels good. I'm like, oh, you know, this is great. And for me, like, a lot of the lessons have been finding that balance, finding that middle way. It's like you can't just renounce everything. Like, that's part of experiencing life. But at the same time, you can't just give in to everything either and be like a wet noodle. So there's like somewhere in the middle that we're working to understand it through, at least for me, like through these extremes. Like, okay, like that doesn't work and that doesn't work. So where can I kind of find some middle ground here? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've noticed also in life is like the longest learning experience, and it's fucking tedious because I have to live every single second of the learning part, like I think growing up, I very much so bought into the idea of like success is over there in the future. Over there it is. Like right now it's you don't have the feeling of you've made it or anything like that. Like keep pushing until you get over there. But I've also learned that like once I get there, once I accomplish goals, because I obviously accomplish a lot of goals, it's like I don't feel like everything's done. It's like, oh fuck, I thought at one point I was gonna understand and get everything down and I was gonna be set. And then you get to the point where you've been reaching for it and you're just like, fuck, dude, I'm like still just learning everything and like relearning. And then I forget things and it's like just learning. So now I know what people mean by it's a learning process.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's this pendulum effect too, that like the more we like want something or like really hold that, we push it away. It's like the more we're like pulling that pendulum towards us, the more it wants to go away. And so the more you want that woman or that money or that status or whatever you're chasing, you're pushing it away. You're pushing that pendulum further and further away from you. So there's like this dance with it really of like moving towards something with purpose, but not being like, not holding it like, all right, like I got this pendulum, like come here pendulum, you push the desires away. It is a box, right?
It's such a paradox because short-term strategy that works really well. Just from like participating in sports, like the more I can dial it and focus and have complete tunnel vision, I'll get the result. Like just put a bunch of pressure and stress and just concentrate it and force and hold and not give up. I've succeeded a lot with sports in that, but doesn't work for everything. And that's where the wisdom comes in, I guess.
Well, and that comes back to the like the thing I was talking about for Rudolf Steiner is like, this has actually helped me to have a lot more self-compassion because we're literally just playing out like these patterns, and to the degree that we're not aware of it, it's just happening like on default, like a computer program. And so it's like, oh, we had these successful actions. Like, of course we're going to do that in the future because we've deemed that gets us some sort of a perception of pleasure. But the thing is, our internal state and external world is always evolving. And so strategies that maybe worked at one point maybe don't work at all, or maybe they just need to be tweaked. It's like there's just this incredible adaptive nature to it. And so it keeps coming back to like, is this thing inside of me, is it coming from a place, is it emerging from a place that wants to be expressed and experienced, or is it something outside of me that is pulling me, that is like drawing me to it? Like, am I moving towards something outside of myself, or am I moving with something coming through me to do something? An example I can give of this, like part of the Rudolf Steiner exercises, you develop this awareness of your thoughts, your emotions, and your will. And you have the awareness of all of them at the same time. And there's a progression to it. So it takes a little bit to develop this. But there was a point where I realized like a total alignment, right? And so basically I had the thought and it was like, I'm hungry. I'm going to eat that pork in the fridge. And then I tuned into my emotional center. I felt joy and expansion. And I tuned into my will center. And the will center is this center that, it's where your body already knows what to do. If you tune into it, you can just move and your body will take you somewhere. And so this is like your will. And so basically my will guided me to the fridge. I'm like observing my thoughts, my emotions. I'm opening the door and it's like, grab the pork, right? And so my thoughts, my emotions, and my will were all on the same page. That was what's going to nourish me in that moment. And our thinking center, our emotional center, and our will center are the seats of the soul, the 3 seats of the soul. Now, if we only listen to the head center, you're going to get mixed results. If you only listen to the feeling center, same thing, same with the will. So it's a matter of where do they all line up? Where are they all saying the same thing? And that is your internal truth. That is your internal compass, but it's in 3 different centers. So you need to be aware of each of them and what they're saying. Because if your mind is like, or let's just say, like a lot of people, they do the feeling, right? So it's like, oh, like I feel this, or I really love this person, or whatever. Okay, like good. Like, think about it for a moment. What happens if you get rid of all your stuff and you fly out to go see some person or whatever? It's like, just think about it a little bit. Use your head center, and then what's the will center want to do, and tune into each of them, and don't just act from one place or one place. Diversify not diversify, but more so center all of them. Uh, and I think it's important to note at this point as well, because I study a lot of these different teachers, and especially like people like Rudolf Steiner and Hazrat Inayat Khan, who's a Sufi guy, and they teach a lot of ideals. And realistically, like even Steiner talks about, like they're not even achievable. Like some of Steiner's stuff is like, to do it is like kind of impossible in a way. I mean, it is, but it isn't. And so the goal isn't to be perfect at it; it's to make effort in that direction. And as long as we continuously make effort in that direction, we will be developing. And so I think that's the important thing of ideals, especially when we look at that on a societal level with all the things going on in the world. I think we can hold these ideals as like a target, but not expect it to like work out perfectly, because that's where you get to like utopian ideals and like, oh, the world's going to be perfect or whatever. It's like, so we hold the ideal, we hold that this is worth fighting for, this is worth dying for, and we move in that direction. As long as we're making effort, it's making progress.
I love that. That resonates very deep with me. Just making progress. My life has been literally a work in fucking progress. And the funny thing is, maybe like a year ago, maybe, I'm not 100% sure, but I was like, pretty developed. I'm like, I don't think there's much more I could actually do. And then you give it time, and then different things I start to notice about myself. I'm like, dude, I hold a lot of tension in these situations. Or fuck, dude, I can't let this one go. Oh, that's crazy. And then like kind of digging a little deeper into that, and like throwing a little practice into kind of like, and I can see a lot of my character just almost blossom and change completely from just like noticing the next step.
Well, and there's, so many layers to it, and that's why our situation's always evolving, and that's why when we get the money, there's something else, because there's new lessons to learn. And I think in the past you had vocalized wanting children at some point. I don't know if
Absolutely, yeah.
well, like I definitely desire to have children as well. And from what I've gathered, they tend to be some of the greatest teachers, because I've been, doing a lot with my family and whatnot, and moving through a lot of my family stuff, and like, things that used to trigger me a lot. I'm just kind of like, all right, but I know that like, okay, like I'm working through the family stuff, but the deeper layer is when you have children, because then you become the parent, and then those programs that you weren't even aware of come online. And I kind of had a little taste of this when I was in Sweden. I was walking this lady's dog, and like her dog was super sweet, and I was having a good time with it. But it was like it kept wanting to like run off, and I was like, no, stay on the path. And I noticed this like tendency within myself of like this really forceful, like, I was like, get over here, like don't run over there. And I did it a few times unconsciously, and I didn't hurt the dog, but I kind of just like tugged on a leash, and it was like I just noticed kind of a forceful energy behind it. And I was like, whoa, like, okay, like I could see the forcefulness that was used on me as a child, and how that was like a pattern. And I was like, whoa, okay, I need to be aware of this when I have children. Like, whoa, okay, you don't need to be so forceful. Like, you don't have to control the situation, whatever. So these, as we have these new situations, family, kids, like new challenges and new things come online that we didn't even know, like that are deep in there, deep in the subconscious. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun in this way, it just keeps on going, and there's always something to dance with.
Yeah, I love that. I want to transition to that's a perfect transition to, the world today, is upside down and sideways. Like it's completely flipped around, and in a way it's challenging because there's a lot of norms and stability that we're used to that's no longer there, but I do think it's an opportunity for all of us to reestablish new patterns, new habits, new norms, so to speak. What are some of the things we can start to do maybe in our own family or our own lives to start setting these new norms? You just kind of mentioned of like being aware of like, hey, like maybe I shouldn't be so forceful with my kids because then it'll pass on to the next 4 generations. Like, let's practice some nonviolent communication, etc. Are there any norms that you've seen completely crumble in today's age, but that crumble is a soil for maybe a potentially, if the right seed is planted, a new beautiful way of progressing?
Well, I could say one thing I've seen a lot of, especially in the realm of financial security, there's been a lot of shifts, and I think there will continue to be even more shifts. And I think in some ways this is preparing us because my perception of that, I think, yes, use money as a tool and it's a very useful tool, but it is not security or foundation because so many different things can happen. So if that's your sense of security, like, just know that it's not as stable as it might seem to be. And so it's giving us an opportunity to cultivate these qualities within. And that teacher I told you about who had the short-term and long-term investments, I think this is a really effective approach because then, like, you can do this with your job, right? Like, for example, I do like network marketing, and part of my short-term investments, I just like connecting with people and I like wandering. So that works really well because I wander around. I'm like, oh, who do I connect with? So my investment of doing that, whether I make money or not, doesn't matter. But inevitably, I do make money doing it. And so if we can align these actions that inherently are fulfilling to do, and this might take a little bit of self-introspection and maybe some perspective shifting and some creativity to kind of align your career into something that is inherently fulfilling, but also in the bigger picture, the long-term investments. Because what happens, or what has happened, is we have a very exchange, or how did he put it? It was, it's like he had a specific way of putting it. It's slipping my mind, but basically, it's very much an exchange thing. So it's like, you do this for me, I'll do this for you. It's very
Reciprocity.
Guys, what?
Reciprocity.
Yeah, but he had like a more. It's more of like we're just doing things to like get something out of someone else. That's a good thing. Collective program.
Oh.
So it's like that's a big thing running in the world right now. Is like people are doing stuff to get something out of someone else, and they're probably not even aware they're doing it. And so what this other exercise does is it takes you out of this like doing things to get something. You're now doing things that by doing them is fulfilling for you. And so you're shifting that paradigm of like, I need to get something from this person, therefore I need to do these things so I can like get this money or get this whatever it is that you're trying to get. And we're always trying to get something, us human beings. So I think that's one layer of it, as far as shifting the internal stability into something that's more sustainable and coming from that place of love. And I think really a lot of that comes from the awareness, right? Like the thing with the dog, the only reason that happened is because I was aware. Otherwise, I would have just kept yanking that dog around the whole way of the trail without even knowing wrong. So we need to have some sort of self-reflection, or like that space you're talking about. I think that space is what most people really need on some level. But we talked about too, the balance, right? The passive and active. So some people, maybe they have too much space. So maybe, you get the rubber on the road, do some active, stuff in your life, find that middle way. But yeah, it's such a dance, and everyone's experience is so individualized in that way.
So if there was a big part of what I feel that needs to be changed is our schooling system.
Yeah.
I feel like, I was 18 years old when I graduated high school. So that was 18 years of almost 18 years, right? 'Cause at pre-K and all that I feel like maybe I learned, man, if I had to crunch all that in, all the stuff that I still have, I probably could have done that in less than like maybe 6 months, right? So it's a waste of our children's potential almost, where those are very formative years. Yes, the times we have the most energy, the most moldable times. Like if we were to completely change that, and that's also falling apart, which is good. And, but we want to make sure when we replace a bad, let's call it a habit, the schooling system, we want to replace it with something positive. You don't want to replace bad with bad. What would you call that? That awareness? Like what would a class of that be called? Would it just be like teaching children to, you know, sit with themselves and be self-aware, or journal, or just, you know, what would that entail to teach?
Well, I think an ideal would be to expose children to many forms of play and creativity and working with their hands and nature and being exposed to many like things in their environment. And you know, I've explored so much of this. Like, there's so many issues in the world, right? And ultimately, it comes from just values.
Mm.
So the values is what's creating the culture, but it goes both ways because the culture is also creating the values. But if we can shift the values, we can shift the culture, and I believe we do that by embodying it. And so, we talked about status, right? And status is a vehicle for instilling values by upholding something that is worth fighting for, upholding something that works in the current set and setting, the current situation, and embodying it, and then people will follow. And but the status doesn't come from chasing it. The status comes from acting from within, from this place of love, investing in your long-term vision, investing in your short-term vision, and upholding the values you've chosen to be important, not because it's part of a program that you're running on, but because you've taken the time to look within and say, this is valuable because it is emerging within me and it wants to be upheld in the world. And I practice it and it works and it brings value. And I know it can bring value to others. And so you uphold that and more people will tune into that. And inevitably, if you play the game, play your cards right, you will get status. And from that status, you can shift things. But it's an incremental process and things aren't going to happen overnight. So there's lots of ways for us to be creative, especially with the school systems. Like there's even, different people doing, even like locally for me, they're doing different offerings for the kids, especially there's a lot of stuff with the mental health now. So, we can start to find creative ways to implement these ideals and kind of like meet the world where it's at, like a rainbow, and start to make those shifts. But yeah, I truly feel, it's the embodiment of the values that's going to shift the world. And the more of us that, I was even contemplating on this today. I was like, what is worth dying for? Like I wasn't thinking in the sense of like literally dying, but it could be that. But I was thinking in the sense of like to really die to each moment, to really sacrifice the lower self or the limited perspective that we have, the tendency to grasp, I would say, maybe an unhealthy ego complex, right? To allow that to die. What is worth dying for? And I think that comes to your dream, right? What is worth moving towards, that is worth sacrificing all these different aspects of yourself that you've hold on to so tightly, but you're willing to let it go from love and offer it up because you know that if you do, then you can make something even greater happen. And so you're not sacrificing it as a way of forcing yourself or a way of like subduing yourself into submission. You're doing it from a place of love, a place of, and in that way it's sustainable,
Yeah. For me, it's been moving towards the most beautiful picture I can fathom in my head.
Yes. Good. Go ahead.
I was just saying that I've thought about that too, about like the dying thing, like what is worth it to die for. The one for me, I sometimes feel is like the health of people. Like when I see people getting forced to take vaccinations that have not been proven to work, or just brainwashed to take things, medication, and not given natural medicine that works, that is cheaper, that is more affordable and healthier for the body, and seeing people poison other people for profit, that's one that charges me up. So like I'll die for that,
One, that whole thing that, our world is perceived through our senses, and to the degree that our senses are distorted due to the health and alignment of our body, then our perception of the world is distorted. And, Steiner, he talks about, so when we see, for example, another person or a color, for example, we're seeing it through the eye, and the shape of the eye affects how we perceive that color. That's why people have different color distortion, color blindness, things like this. Is that it's comes down to the shape of the eye and a few other factors. But also, so let's say the stimuli comes into the eye, and then the eye, from the shape of it, it goes into the like the visual cortex to the optical nerve, right? And in the optical nerve, it actually changes again. So we saw it through the eye changes it, goes through the optical nerve changes it, goes into the brain perceives it and also changes it. And then it, goes to the soul level, and then we perceive the color. So that's coming through our senses. And all of our senses, based on how they're calibrated, are determining our perception of reality, and also how we orient. If we orient towards the habit of negativity, the habit of seeing ugliness or whatever we're perceiving, we're going to see that everywhere. Everyone's had the experience where they have maybe a car comes into their awareness, they start seeing the car everywhere, right? It's the same with how we perceive. If we're attuned to a certain thing, we're going to see it everywhere. And so I think that's a very valuable mission because, yeah, I mean, that's people's entire perception of reality is being hijacked through their health. And so their health can be reestablished, their perception of reality can become much more true and pure.
And that's the most exciting life to live, as Jordan Peterson says, to live by truth. Are we at an hour? Where are we at? Where are we at with time? Do you know? Oh, you think it would? Oh, an hour 10. Okay, I think we'll begin wrapping it up. We can do this all day. Honestly, this is beautiful. I literally could do this all day.
I wanted to touch on one other thing. So
please,
this thing of values.
Yeah, please.
For this, and so I've been to a lot of different communities, and there's obviously a lot out there, and there's different levels of development, and they're all in like phases of experimentation. But there's a lot of interpersonal conflict that you can observe, and hopefully not get sucked into while you're there, and hopefully stay the observer. But there's a lot of conflict, and I think that stems from this understanding of the we all phases of development. So if we can develop, I think, incrementally, because I think what happened is many people, maybe they had a developed and then they jumped right into these communities, and then it wasn't very harmonious because they didn't develop the we. And it's also possible maybe they didn't even develop the But I think it's important that we develop the then we develop the we through partnership or also friendship, right? And develop that, strengthen your we, and then move into these larger groups. And I think that's a more cohesive evolution that will lead to more harmony. Because if we can go deep within ourselves and then bring that depth into our relationship and then bring it into the larger group. So I think this thing of developing a core values and then finding or aligning yourself with a partner or friends who are willing to uphold those values with you, and becoming that kind of like support for each other in upholding those values and relating through those values through the world, and developing a strong we, and be like, I value this, we value this. The we is stronger than the when they're both developed. When the I's are both developed, when I and I come together as we, they're much stronger than just I. And then when I and I, the whole community, the all comes together under values, this is when big shifts happen in the world, when we uphold strong values together.
Now, on a practical scenario, I'm always thinking all right, well, step one, right? So would you say hey, I understand my values, I'd find maybe another person who have the same values, and then what do we do from there?
You engage in a relationship and you go deep, and you see the tendency to run away from it, or whatever your strategy is with relationship. We all have different strategies, and go deep into it and face the challenges. And this is like divine partnership, right? and it can be applied to friendship as well. But in partnership, it brings up a lot of other stuff. So it's like divine partnership is like you're committed to that person on a soul level for the growth and development of their soul. And so you're together upholding these values and also moving through whatever is not like aligned within you. And it's not an easy thing. I mean, at least my experience, you get kind of eaten alive, but you can be like, whoa, like this is amazing. This person's like seeing so much that I haven't been able to see. And you can help work with that. So I think it's through going deep into relationships. And I think, at least, I mean, for me, but for many people, I think is very challenging. But I think that's really the avenue towards these communities really developing out, is to go deep and move through challenges. And even, I've explored because I've done a lot of traveling and I want to like hang out with different people and this kind of thing. But at that level, you only get so deep with the people you're around. And so if you commit to being with someone longer, then there's the opportunity to go, a lot deeper. But it's more painful in that way because the closer we get to people, the better we are at hurting them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And how about like buddies? Like me and your buddies. I got a couple buddies that are having the same values. I'm obviously not gonna get in like a relationship with my buddies. Well, what would you say? Is it more about like working on a project together, and then now you're in like a business relationship or a project relationship?
Yeah,
And I'm asking just because that really resonated to the fact of like, hey, like if we're gonna bring, if we're actually gonna make some change in a positive way for future generations and our children, we need to identify values, find others that have that values, create a we relationship until it becomes the all.
So this could possibly be an ideal, but it seems realistic enough. And I think the avenue that goes to, that you're speaking to, at least from like a male level, male kind of friendship, it stepping more into that kind of divine masculine role. And I think more casting that stone, brother, casting that stone from a place of love. But I would say,
like keeping your friend in check,
keeping them in check, and in a way, I think better than even keeping it in check is inviting the feedback. I think that takes even more courage.
Oh yeah, man.
They have them show you their shadow, but not wait for them to cast that stone, but say, hey, please show me. And I think in that way, iron sharpens iron, and we can say, okay, we have these values, but like, this isn't happening because I have this shadow, and this isn't happening because you have this shadow. And then how can we move through this together? And this is where I think, and that's intimate, right? That is a form of intimacy,
honesty,
and like
confrontation almost.
Confrontation, yeah. So this, I think, is the real thing, going deep into relationships, right? And it's not an easy thing. That's why it's not happening for many people. But I think that's where, at least in my own life, something I'm exploring is like relationship as this huge tool and catalyst for growth opportunities. And also observing the, if I jump around from person to person or place to place, like I can only, there's a lot of drawbacks to that. And I love traveling and I love meeting new people and it's great. But now it's like I'm kind of getting to a phase in my life where it's like part of me really wants this like deeper connection, this deeper growth, this more rooted stability. Because I've noticed if I stay in one place for, I can get a lot more done. I can be more productive, more creative. So at least in my own life, the phase I'm in, just going deeper and deeper into the experience, and it's challenging, man, but it's beautiful at the same time, because the deeper we go into that, and the cool thing too about this, like this courage with the feedback thing, like that's a quality, right? So we begin to cultivate the quality of like asking for this feedback that's very scary and challenging to do, and having the courage to receive that feedback, but also for the other person to have the courage to actually say to that thing, because we might not want to be like, well, maybe they don't want to hear this thing, And so that kind of relationship at first is really scary. It's like anything. It's like doing that thing you've been procrastinating on. It's really hard at first. You do it a couple times, it becomes more natural. You start to do it. That becomes a new way of being. And then you're relating, you're like, you're doing stuff with your homies, and then something goes down, and you're like, instantly, you're like, was there something I was doing there? Like, I don't know. I kind of, and they're like, oh, well, actually, like, and then you're like, ah, yeah, okay, and then you're like, dap them up. It's like your homies,
Yeah.
This is like, yeah, iron sharpens iron. So I think that's how that correlates to the friendship level. I guess that could work with women as well. Speaking
Oh,
of,
no, that's fire. No, I love that because I don't do that a lot myself. So, because I'm still growing and developing that confrontational aspect of myself.
yeah, me as well, me as well.
Yeah, beautiful. So let's end there, man. Really appreciate you being on. Fire sucked the whole way through. I barely get touched my notes, which is great. I love that, dude. We just fucking float. Eric, you're Imperium, right? You're starting a group of people that want to go deeper. Imperium is great, by the way. I fucking love their sunshine, the cocoa aminos, the essential aminos. And then the cracked spirulina, that was bomb too. I really love Purium's products. If people are trying to connect with you for Purium, or just contact you, maybe ask some questions and whatnot, where can they reach you, buddy?
Yeah, so Eric _Delozier on Instagram. So ERIC _DELOZIER. That's probably the easiest way to access me. And also, I'm working on something I've been researching for probably four plus years and applying it to my own life, being this experimenter that I am.
Yeah.
Working with a lot of the cycles. And so
Yes.
is to take 12 people on a 12-month journey through a very, very deep transformative experience. Each month, we will be working with a single quality, and all you have to do that month is walk hand in hand with that quality and put in effort to make that quality, to understand everything you can about that quality and become intimate with that quality, so much so that it becomes a valuable friend and asset to you. And by the end of the 12 months, you will have developed 12 qualities that you can now call upon at any moment that will be there to support you in any moment. And each of them has different faculties to them. So one of them would be compassion, to give an example of the type of qualities, but
Yeah.
Truth is another one. So
Yeah,
different qualities to be upholding. So I think that will be very exciting. That's likely to be launched towards the beginning of the new year. So
Yeah. Beautiful, dude. Fuck yeah. That sounds awesome. And to people that don't know, Eric does he goes hit your calendars by the moons. I fucking love that. I want to
season, there's a lot that goes into it because it's also that person's individual, the season of their life, for example. Like we go through these seasons. So what, like for my phase of my life right now, I'm very much in a spring phase. So that's a phase of a lot of planting seeds, a lot of doing things. There's not so much of a yield. The yield comes in the harvest.
Yep.
And then in your life comes a harvest, and there's micro harvest, but for some people, maybe that's their 40, they have their harvest, but it can come in many, many different ways. But the thing with harvest, if we don't plant anything in the spring and the summer, and we just slack off, we're waiting for like the universe to provide for us or whatever, we're going to have our harvest and we're going to be sitting there like, my garden's empty. I don't, like, God, what happened? He's like, you didn't plant any seeds, bro.
Oh, I love that.
So,
all right. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for being on, bro. I really appreciate it. Catch you another time.
all right, brother. Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. If you believe more constructive information like this should be out there for people to know, please leave a like on this video. And if you're a person who's into self-development in all aspects of their life, please subscribe, because that is what we do here at Good Demand. Keep demanding good things. And if you haven't bought a pair of our Good Night blue blockers and you use a phone at night or an iPad or TV at night, please consider buying a pair of these. They're beautiful and they work so well and they help support our growth.